September 19th, 1944, a muddy field outside Arracourt, France. Through the morning fog, Oberleutenant Franz-Josef Strauss of Panzer Brigade 113 watched an American tank destroyer emerge from the tree line. His binoculars revealed what German intelligence had been reporting for weeks. The M18 Hellcat, 20 tons of what Wehrmacht tactical doctrine had classified as a target, not a threat. The briefing documents had been explicit. American tank destroyers sacrificed armor for speed, mounting only 13 millimeters of steel plate on the hull front. Less protection than an armored car. The reports concluded these vehicles would be vulnerable to any German anti-tank weapon, easy prey for experienced Panzer crews operating the formidable Panther tank. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Strauss commanded a Panther Ausf, G-45, tons of the most sophisticated tank Germany had produced. Frontal armor measuring 80 millimeters thick, sloped at 55 degrees, creating an effective thickness of 140 millimeters. The long 75mm gun could destroy a Sherman tank at 3 kilometers, German engineering at its finest. The Hellcat looked fragile by comparison. Open-topped turret, thin armor visible even at distance. The Wehrmacht had trained its Panzer crews to recognize such vehicles as minor obstacles, something to be brushed aside while engaging real threats. What Strauss and thousands of other German tankers did not yet understand was that the Americans had built something fundamentally different. Not a tank, not even a tank destroyer in the traditional sense. They had created a weapon system optimized for a single purpose, killing German armor through speed and firepower rather than protection, and mounted on that seemingly vulnerable chassis were 5 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns, anti-aircraft weapons, according to German tactical assessments, useful for suppressing infantry perhaps, certainly no threat to armored vehicles. Except the Panther's engine deck, that expanse of 16mm armor plate covering the power plant at the rear of the vehicle was precisely within the penetration capability of armor-piercing 50 caliber ammunition. The Germans had designed their most advanced tank with a critical vulnerability they did not fully appreciate. The Americans had fielded a tank destroyer whose secondary armament could exploit that vulnerability. The mathematics were simple, though German intelligence had not performed them. Armor-piercing 50 caliber ammunition could penetrate 19 millimeters of steel at 500 meters. The Panther's engine deck was 16 millimeters thick. Any Hellcat that achieved a position behind or beside a Panther could use its machine guns, not its main gun, to destroy the German tank, by shredding the engine, igniting fuel lines, or starting fires that would gut the vehicle from within. The development of the M18 Hellcat began in December 1941, weeks before Pearl Harbor brought America into the war. The German blitzkrieg victories across Europe had demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of massed armor. American military planners, studying these campaigns, concluded that the United States needed a dedicated tank destroyer force, not tanks supporting infantry, but specialized vehicles designed specifically to hunt and kill enemy armor. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Davis Bruce championed a radical concept. Tank destroyers should emphasize speed and firepower while accepting minimal armor protection. The doctrine called for these vehicles to operate defensively, moving rapidly to threatened sectors, engaging enemy armor from ambush positions, then displacing before enemy forces could return effective fire. Speed would provide the protection that armor could not. This philosophy contradicted traditional military thinking. Throughout history, armored vehicles had prioritized protection. The heavier the armor, the better the vehicle. Bruce argued that World War II's mechanized warfare demanded different priorities. Mobility mattered more than armor. A fast vehicle in the right position was more valuable than a heavily armoured vehicle in the wrong position. The Ordnance Department issued specifications in January 1942. The vehicle needed to mount a gun capable of defeating German armour at range. It needed to achieve speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour. It needed to be mechanically reliable and simple to maintain. Weight limitations were strict. The vehicle could not exceed 20 tons. Multiple companies submitted designs. Christie, General Motors, and Buick all developed prototypes. The Buick design, designated T-70, emerged as the front-runner by April 1943. It combined innovative features with practical engineering. The T-70 mounted a 76mm M1 gun, the same weapon used on late-model Sherman tanks. This gun fired armor-piercing rounds capable of penetrating 88mm of armor at 1,000 meters, sufficient to defeat German medium tanks, though marginal against the frontal armor of Panthers and Tigers. The vehicle's power plant was a Continental R975 radial engine, the same engine used in Sherman tanks. This 9-cylinder air-cooled engine produced 400 horsepower. In a 30-ton Sherman, this engine provided adequate but unspectacular performance. In the 17-ton T-70, it provided extraordinary speed. The T-70's power-to-weight ratio exceeded 23 horsepower per ton, nearly double that of German tanks. More revolutionary was the transmission. Buick engineers developed the Torque-matic automatic transmission, one of the first automatic transmissions used in combat vehicles. This system eliminated the need for clutch operation and simplified gear changes, allowing drivers to focus on maneuvering rather than managing complex controls. The automatic transmission proved remarkably reliable and gave the T-70 exceptional acceleration. The suspension used torsion bars, a proven system that provided a stable firing platform even while moving at high speed. The wide tracks distributed the vehicle's weight effectively, giving it excellent cross-country mobility. The T-70 could traverse terrain that would bog down heavier vehicles. Armor protection was deliberately minimal. The hull front measured 13 millimeters. The sides were 13 millimeters. The rear was 13 millimeters. The turret front was 25 millimeters. The turret sides were 12.5 millimeters. For comparison, a German Panther had 80 millimeters of frontal armor and 40 to 50 millimeters on the sides. An American Sherman had 51 millimeters of frontal armor. The T-70's armor could not stop German anti-tank weapons. Any direct hit from a German tank gun, anti-tank gun, or Panzerfaust would penetrate. The designers accepted this vulnerability as the price of speed. Crews would rely on not being hit rather than surviving hits. The turret was open-topped, another weight-saving measure that also improved crew visibility and reduced claustrophobia. The open top made crews vulnerable to artillery airburst, grenades, and snipers, but it allowed excellent observation of the battlefield. Tank destroyer doctrine emphasized seeing the enemy first, engaging from ambush, and withdrawing before the enemy could respond effectively. The open turret supported this tactical approach. Armament consisted of the 76mm main gun with 45 rounds of ammunition. A 50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun was mounted on the turret ring for the vehicle commander. This weapon had 800 rounds of ammunition. 4 additional 50 caliber machine guns could be mounted, though. Most crews carried only the commander's weapon to save weight. The crew consisted of 5 men. The driver sat in the left front hull. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The assistant driver and bow gunner sat in the right front hull, operating a 30 caliber machine gun. The commander, gunner, and loader occupied the turret. Communication between positions used an intercom system, allowing coordination during combat. In March 1944, the Ordnance Department standardized the T-70 as the 76mm gun motor carriage M18. Buick's marketing department coined the nickname Hellcat, emphasizing the vehicle's aggressive hunting role. The name captured the essence of tank destroyer doctrine. Hellcats hunted prey. They did not stand and fight. They struck and withdrew. Production began at Buick's Flint, Michigan facility in July 1943. The factory had been converted from automobile production to war material manufacturing. Assembly lines that once built Buick sedans now produced tank destroyers. Workers, many of them women who had entered the workforce to replace men serving in the military, assembled these vehicles at a rate approaching 100 per month. Quality control was rigorous. Each vehicle underwent extensive testing before acceptance. Engines were run for hours under load. Transmissions were cycled through all gears repeatedly. Guns were fired to verify accuracy. Any defects resulted in the vehicle being pulled from the line for correction. The result was a mechanically reliable weapon system that performed well in the field. By October 1944, when production ended, Buick had manufactured 2,507 M18 Hellcats. This production run, though smaller than the 7,000 M10 tank destroyers or the 2,000 M36 tank destroyers produced, provided sufficient vehicles to equip multiple tank destroyer battalions. The first M18s shipped to Europe in spring 1944. 3 prototype vehicles designated T-70 reached Italy in May, assigned to the 894th Tank Destroyer Battalion at the Anzio beachhead. Combat trials revealed both strengths and weaknesses. The speed and firepower impressed crews. The thin armor concerned them. The open turret exposed crews to mortar fragments and snipers. The 76mm gun, while effective against German medium tanks, struggled to penetrate the frontal armor of Panthers and Tigers. But Italian mountain terrain did not favor the Hellcat's primary advantage. The narrow, winding roads limited opportunities to use speed. The close terrain negated long-range engagements. Tank destroyers found themselves pressed into infantry support roles, firing high-explosive rounds at German defensive positions rather than hunting armor. France would prove different. The rolling terrain of northeastern France provided ideal conditions for mobile armored warfare. Open fields allowed rapid movement. Hedgerows and woodlines provided concealment for ambush positions. The road network supported quick displacement. Here, the Hellcat could fight as designed. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion received M18 Hellcats in August 1944. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper commanded one of the companies. His crews trained intensively on the new vehicles, learning to exploit speed and firepower while accepting vulnerability. The doctrine was explicit: see the enemy first, engage from unexpected positions, fire accurately, withdraw immediately. Never exchange fire with enemy armor from a static position. Mobility was survival. Tank destroyer tactics emphasized coordination with infantry and artillery. Tank destroyers did not operate independently. They worked as part of combined arms teams. Infantry provided security against enemy infantry attacks. Artillery suppressed enemy anti-tank guns. Tank destroyers engaged enemy armor. This coordination required extensive communication and planning. Crews learned that their thin armor made close-range engagements suicidal. The 76mm gun was effective at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. The Hellcat's speed allowed it to reach flanking positions where side and rear armor of German tanks was vulnerable. A well-positioned Hellcat could destroy a Panther from the side at 2,000 meters, far beyond the range at which the Panther's gun could effectively return fire against such a small, fast-moving target. The 50 caliber machine guns received less attention during training. Crews viewed them primarily as anti-aircraft weapons and infantry suppression tools. Few appreciated that armor-piercing 50 caliber ammunition could penetrate light armor, including the engine decks of German tanks. This capability would prove crucial in combat, though it was not emphasized in doctrine or training. By September 1944, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion was combat-ready. They had mastered their vehicles. They understood their doctrine. They were equipped with the fastest tracked combat vehicle in the American arsenal. They were about to face the best tank Germany had produced, in terrain that would determine whether American tank destroyer doctrine was brilliant innovation or fatal mistake. The German 5th Panzer Army had been rebuilt following devastating losses in Normandy. Fresh Panzer brigades equipped with the latest Panthers had been assembled and trained. These units represented Germany's last significant armoured reserve in the West. Their mission was to blunt the American advance, stabilise the front, and buy time for Germany to prepare new defensive lines. Panzer Brigade 113 fielded approximately 90 tanks, predominantly Panthers with some Panzer IVs in support. The Panther Ausf. G represented German tank design at its peak. The sloped 80mm frontal armour was essentially impenetrable to American 75mm and 76mm guns at normal combat ranges. The long 75mm KUK-42 gun could destroy any American tank at ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. German crews had trained extensively on the Panther's capabilities. They understood that frontal engagements favored them overwhelmingly. American Shermans and tank destroyers could not penetrate Panther frontal armor with standard ammunition. Only flank or rear shots offered reliable kill opportunities. German doctrine emphasized presenting frontal armor to the enemy while using the superior gun to destroy American vehicles before they could maneuver to flanking positions. The Panther's weaknesses were less emphasized in training. The side armor, 40 to 50 millimeters thick, could be penetrated by American 76mm guns at combat ranges. The rear armor was even thinner. Most critically, the engine deck consisted of 16mm armor plate with ventilation grills that exposed the engine to damage. This engine deck vulnerability was known to German engineers, but considered acceptable. Tank destroyers and anti-tank guns attacking from the rear would use their main weapons, not machine guns. The thin engine deck armor was sufficient against artillery fragments and small arms fire. No one had seriously considered that vehicle-mounted heavy machine guns might exploit this weakness. German intelligence assessments of American tank destroyers reflected doctrinal bias. German armor philosophy prioritized protection and firepower. The Panther weighed 45 tons precisely because German designers believed armor was essential. The American philosophy of trading armor for speed seemed fundamentally flawed. How could a vehicle with 13 millimeters of armor survive on a battlefield dominated by high-velocity anti-tank weapons? Wehrmacht tactical manuals classified American tank destroyers as secondary threats. First priority was destroying American medium tanks, particularly the 76mm armed Sherman variants that could threaten Panther-side armor. Tank destroyers would be engaged opportunistically, but were not considered capable of meaningfully affecting Panzer operations. This assessment was about to be catastrophically disproven. On September 18, 1944, Panzer Brigade 113 moved toward Arracourt as part of a larger counteroffensive. The brigade's mission was to attack American positions, destroy American armor, and recapture territory lost during the Allied advance. German commanders expected to face Sherman tanks and towed anti-tank guns. They anticipated hard fighting but ultimately successful operations. The Panther's superiority over Sherman tanks had been demonstrated repeatedly in Normandy. Weather conditions favoured the Germans. Heavy fog blanketed the battlefield, reducing visibility to less than 100 meters in places. This fog would neutralize American air superiority and force close-range engagements where the Panthers' armor advantage would be decisive. German tank commanders moved forward confidently. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion had established positions in wooded areas surrounding Arracourt. Lieutenant Edwin Leiper's company occupied a tree line overlooking open fields. The fog obscured visibility, but American commanders had received intelligence reports of German armor movements. The Hellcat crews waited, engines idling quietly, ready to move at a moment's notice. Tank destroyer doctrine called for fluid defensive operations. Unlike fixed defensive positions, tank destroyer units maintained mobility even while defending. They identified likely enemy approach routes, established multiple firing positions, and planned withdrawal routes. When enemy armor appeared, they would engage from ambush, inflict casualties, then displace to alternate positions before enemy forces could respond effectively. At approximately 0700 hours on September 19th, the fog began to lift. Visibility improved to several hundred meters. German Panthers appeared, advancing across the open fields toward American positions. The Panthers moved in formation, presenting frontal armor toward expected threats. Their commanders scanned for American tanks and anti-tank guns. They did not adequately scan their flanks. Leiper's Hellcats were positioned perpendicular to the German advance, concealed in the tree line. The Panthers were presenting their sides, the vulnerable 40 to 50 mm armor, directly toward the American tank destroyers. Range was approximately 800 meters. Ideal conditions for ambush. Leiper gave the order to fire. 5 M18 Hellcats opened fire simultaneously. The 76 mm guns sent armor-piercing rounds downrange at 2,600 feet per second. At 800 meters, these rounds retained sufficient energy to penetrate Panther side armor. The first German tank erupted in flames as an American round penetrated the ammunition storage, causing a catastrophic internal explosion. The second Panther took a hit to the engine compartment and ground to a halt, smoke pouring from the engine deck. German tank commanders reacted immediately, attempting to traverse their turrets toward the threat. But the Panther's turret traverse was slow, requiring approximately 16 seconds to rotate 180 degrees using the manual hand crank, or approximately 6 seconds using the powered traverse. The Hellcats had already begun moving. Tank destroyer doctrine emphasized shoot and scoot, engage, then immediately displace. The M18's speed made this practical. While German Panthers were still identifying firing positions and attempting to return fire, the Hellcats were accelerating away, reaching 30 miles per hour within seconds. The combination of speed and acceleration made them extraordinarily difficult targets. But not all Hellcats withdrew immediately. Several crews had identified an opportunity. Panthers attempting to maneuver were exposing their rear quarters and engine decks. The American crews understood that while their 76 mm guns could penetrate Panther side armor, rear shots offered even better kill probability. Several Hellcats maneuvered aggressively to achieve rear quarter shooting positions. Staff Sergeant Henry Hartmann commanded one of these aggressive crews. His Hellcat sprinted from the tree line, accelerating to over 40 miles per hour across open ground, maneuvering to reach a flanking position behind the German formation. This maneuver was extraordinarily risky. If German tanks engaged his vehicle, the thin armor would provide no protection. But speed made him a difficult target, and German commanders were focused on the positions where Hellcats had initially fired. Hartmann's crew reached a position 800 meters behind the German formation. From this angle, they could see the rear armor and engine decks of multiple Panthers. The 76 mm gun engaged first, destroying one Panther with Perty, a rear penetration that ignited fuel tanks. Then Hartmann made a decision that would become legendary in tank destroyer circles. He ordered his gunner to cease fire with the main gun and directed the assistant driver to engage with the 50 caliber machine gun. The logic was sound. The 76mm gun required approximately 6 seconds between shots for the loader to chamber another round. The 50 caliber machine gun could fire 500 rounds per minute, over 8 rounds per second sustained fire. More importantly, Hartmann had noticed something during earlier engagements. The Panther's engine deck, that 16mm armor plate with large ventilation grills, was within the penetration capability of armor-piercing 50 caliber ammunition. The Browning M2 machine gun mounted on American vehicles fired armor-piercing rounds designated M2 AP. These rounds consisted of a hardened steel core in a brass jacket with lead alloy point filler. The soft jacket acted like the cap on large-caliber armor-piercing rounds, improving penetration against face-hardened armor. At ranges under 500 meters, these rounds could completely penetrate 19 millimeters of hardened steel armor plate. The Panther's engine deck was 16 millimeters thick. Hartmann's 50 caliber gunner opened fire at a Panther approximately 400 meters away. Armor-piercing rounds struck the engine deck at a rate of 8 per second. The first rounds that hit solid armor plate ricocheted or fragmented, but rounds that struck the ventilation grills penetrated directly into the engine compartment. The Maybach HL-230 engine that powered the Panther was a sophisticated but temperamental 12-cylinder gasoline engine producing 700 horsepower. The engine compartment also contained fuel lines, oil lines, electrical wiring, cooling systems, and air filters. All of these systems were vulnerable to damage from high-velocity projectiles entering through the ventilation grills. Within 3 seconds of sustained fire, approximately 24 armor-piercing rounds had struck the engine deck. Several penetrated the grills. One severed a fuel line. Another damaged the carburetor. A third struck the engine block itself, causing internal damage. Fuel began spraying across the hot engine. Flames erupted. The German crew, feeling their tank shudder from impacts and seeing fire warning lights illuminate, evacuated immediately. Within 30 seconds, the Panther was burning fiercely, the fire consuming everything flammable in the engine compartment. Hartmann's gunner shifted fire to a second Panther, approximately 500 meters distant. Again, sustained 50 caliber fire raked the engine deck. Again, rounds penetrated the ventilation grills. This Panther did not catch fire immediately, but the engine seized as 50 caliber rounds destroyed critical components. The vehicle was immobilized, mission killed, even though the crew remained alive, and the main gun still functioned. Over the next 20 minutes of chaotic combat, Hartmann's crew destroyed or disabled 6 German Panthers. 2 kills came from the 76mm main gun striking side or rear armor. 4 kills came from sustained 50 caliber machine gun fire against engine decks and ventilation systems. The 50 caliber machine gun, a weapon German intelligence had classified as an anti-aircraft system, had proven devastatingly effective against the most advanced tank in the Wehrmacht inventory. Other Hellcat crews observed Hartmann's tactics and adapted quickly. American tankers had always been pragmatic, willing to abandon doctrine when battlefield reality suggested better approaches. If 50 caliber machine guns could destroy Panthers by attacking engine decks, then 50 caliber machine guns would be used for that purpose. The psychological impact on German crews was severe. Panther tanks had been designed to be nearly invincible from the front, well protected on the sides, and reasonably secure from the rear as long as they maintained situational awareness. But now, American tank destroyers were destroying Panthers with machine gun fire. Weapons that should have been irrelevant against armoured vehicles were penetrating and igniting engines. German tank commanders began to realise that the thin engine deck armour, considered adequate during the Panther's design phase, was actually a critical vulnerability against an enemy equipped with large numbers of heavy machine guns. Every American tank, tank destroyer, and armoured vehicle mounted at least one 50 caliber machine gun. Many mounted multiple 50 caliber guns. If all of these weapons could destroy Panthers by attacking engine systems, then Panthers were far more vulnerable than doctrine had indicated. The engagement near Arracourt on September 19th lasted approximately 4 hours. When German forces withdrew, they left behind 39 destroyed or disabled tanks. American forces lost 4 Hellcats. The kill ratio was approximately 10-1 in favour of the Americans, a remarkable achievement considering the Panthers' technical superiority over the M18 in armour protection and arguably in firepower. Post-battle analysis revealed the reasons for this lopsided outcome. First, American tank destroyer doctrine had proven effective. The emphasis on mobility, ambush tactics, and immediate displacement after engagement allowed Hellcat crews to engage on their terms. They chose firing positions that exploited Panther vulnerabilities. They engaged when conditions favoured them and withdrew when conditions did not. Second, German tactical employment of armour had been flawed. Advancing across open terrain without adequate reconnaissance, presenting flanks to enemy positions, and failing to coordinate infantry and artillery support had created ideal conditions for American ambush. The fog that German commanders thought would protect them had instead concealed American positions until it was too late to react effectively. Third, the M18's speed had proven decisive. Accelerating from 0 to 30 miles per hour in 8 seconds gave Hellcat crews the ability to reposition faster than German tanks could react. German tankers trained for combat where engagement ranges and positions changed over minutes. The Hellcats changed positions in seconds. Fourth, and perhaps most significantly, the discovery that 50 caliber machine guns could destroy Panthers by attacking engine decks provided Hellcat crews with a backup weapon when main gun ammunition was expended or when circumstances favoured sustained fire over precision shots. This tactical innovation emerged from battlefield necessity and rapidly propagated through American tank destroyer units. The battle continued over the following days. Between September 18th and September 29th, the broader Battle of Arracourt saw repeated engagements between American forces, including Hellcat-equipped tank destroyer battalions and German Panzer formations. By the end of the operation, German 5th Panzer Army had lost approximately 200 armoured vehicles. American losses were significantly lighter. The effectiveness of 50 caliber machine guns against Panther engine decks became a documented tactic. After-action reports from multiple tank destroyer battalions noted that sustained 50 caliber fire against the rear of German tanks frequently resulted in mobility kills or total destruction. Intelligence officers analysed captured Panthers and confirmed that the ventilation grilles provided access to the engine compartment and that 16mm armour deck could be penetrated by armour-piercing 50 caliber ammunition at combat ranges. This information spread rapidly through American armoured forces. Tank commanders whose primary weapon was the 75mm gun, which could not penetrate Panther frontal armour, learned that their 50 caliber machine guns could achieve kills if they could maneuver to rear or flank positions. This tactical knowledge influenced how American units approached combat with German heavy tanks. German responses came slowly. The Wehrmacht was fighting on multiple fronts with dwindling resources. Redesigning the Panther to address engine deck vulnerabilities would have required retooling factories and interrupting production. Instead, tactical instructions emphasized maintaining infantry support to prevent enemy vehicles from achieving rear-quarter firing positions. German commanders were instructed to ensure that Panthers never operated without infantry protection and that rear areas were secured against enemy infiltration. These instructions were easier to issue than to implement. By late 1944, Germany was losing the war. Infantry units were under strength. Coordination between armor and infantry had deteriorated due to equipment losses, fuel shortages, and declining unit cohesion. Panthers increasingly operated in small groups or even individually, making them vulnerable to exactly the sort of flanking attacks that allowed American crews to engage engine decks with machine gun fire. The M18 Hellcat continued fighting through the winter of 1944 and into 1945. During the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, Hellcat units played crucial roles in blunting German armoured thrusts. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, attached to the 101st Airborne Division, contributed significantly to the defence of Bastogne. Their Hellcats engaged German armour in the forests and towns surrounding the besieged city, inflicting heavy casualties on attacking forces. The combination of winter weather, close terrain, and desperate German attacks created extremely difficult combat conditions. Hellcat crews fought from static positions more often than tank destroyer doctrine preferred, but the 76mm gun proved effective against German armour at the close ranges typical of winter forest fighting. The 50 caliber machine guns again proved valuable, not just against engine decks but also against German infantry and light vehicles. As the Allied advance pushed into Germany in early 1945, Hellcat battalions participated in breakthrough operations and pursuit actions. The speed that had proven so valuable in defensive ambush situations also proved effective in offensive operations. Hellcat units could advance rapidly behind enemy lines, engage German forces attempting to establish defensive positions, and disrupt enemy rear areas. By May 1945, when the war in Europe ended, M18 Hellcats had compiled an impressive combat record. Official statistics credited them with 526 enemy armoured vehicles destroyed across all theatres, 498 kills in Europe, 17 in Italy, and 11 in the Pacific. Against these kills, 217 Hellcats were lost to all causes, including combat, mechanical failure, and accidents. The kill-to-loss ratio of 2.4 to 1 was the highest of any American armoured vehicle in World War II. For comparison, the M4 Sherman tank achieved approximately a 1-to-1 ratio. The M10 tank destroyer achieved approximately 1.5 to 1. The heavily armed M36 tank destroyer, mounting a 90mm gun, achieved approximately 2 to 1. The lightly armoured, fast-moving M18 had proven more effective at destroying enemy armour while preserving itself than any other American vehicle. This statistical record vindicated Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Davis Bruce's original vision. Speed and firepower could substitute for armour protection if doctrine emphasized exploiting those advantages. The tank destroyer concept, which many military professionals had questioned, had proven effective when implemented properly with vehicles designed specifically for the role. But the most significant legacy of the Hellcat was not statistical, it was tactical. The M18 demonstrated that unconventional approaches to armoured warfare could succeed against technically superior enemy vehicles. The Panther was, in nearly every measurable way, a better tank than the M18, heavier armour, more powerful gun, better protection for the crew. Yet Hellcats destroyed Panthers at rates far exceeding what should have been possible based on technical specifications alone. The reason was doctrine and tactics. American tank destroyer crews understood their vehicles' capabilities and limitations. They fought in ways that exploited German weaknesses while avoiding German strengths. They accepted vulnerability as the price of speed, and used that speed to dictate engagement terms. When they discovered that their secondary weapons could destroy primary threats, they adapted immediately. German tank design philosophy emphasized building the best possible tank, optimizing armor, firepower, and mobility within weight constraints. American tank destroyer philosophy emphasized building a weapon system optimized for a specific mission, accepting compromises in areas that did not directly support that mission. The M18 was not a good tank. It was an excellent tank destroyer, precisely because it was not designed to be a tank. The vulnerability that German tankers mocked, that thin armor which seemed to violate every principle of armored vehicle design, was actually a strength in the context of tank destroyer doctrine. Light armor meant high speed. High speed meant reaching advantageous positions before the enemy could respond. Advantageous positions meant engaging vulnerable enemy aspects while presenting difficult targets. The vulnerability was intentional and tactical, not a design failure. The 50 caliber machine guns, which German intelligence had classified as anti-aircraft weapons, proved that weapon systems could be employed in ways their designers never intended. The M2 Browning was designed to shoot down aircraft and suppress infantry. No one had seriously considered using it as a primary anti-tank weapon. Yet battlefield innovation revealed that massed 50 caliber fire could destroy the most heavily armored German tanks by exploiting specific vulnerabilities. This lesson, that tactical innovation could overcome technical inferiority, influenced American military thinking for decades. The idea that speed and positioning could substitute for armor, that unconventional weapons employment could achieve results impossible through conventional approaches, that doctrine mattered as much as equipment, all these concepts emerged from the M18 Hellcat's combat record. Post-war, several countries adopted the Hellcat. France operated, captured and acquired M18s until the early 1950s. Taiwan received M18s through military aid programs. Yugoslavia operated Hellcats into the early 1990s, using them in the conflicts that followed the breakup of Yugoslavia. The vehicle's mechanical simplicity and reliability meant it could be maintained in service decades after production ended. American military forces retired the M18 from active service in 1957, replacing it with more modern vehicles mounting larger guns in enclosed turrets. But the tank destroyer concept itself persisted. The idea that specialized vehicles could hunt armor more effectively than main battle tanks remained influential in military planning through the Cold War. The technical details of the M18's success informed later vehicle designs. The importance of power-to-weight ratio, the value of automatic transmissions, the effectiveness of torsion bar suspension, all these features became standard in subsequent armored vehicle development. The lessons learned from the Hellcat's thin armor, its vulnerability to return fire, led to designs that emphasized speed and mobility while providing better crew protection. For the German tankers who faced M18 Hellcats in combat, the experience was humbling. They had trained in vehicles they believed to be superior to anything the Americans fielded. The Panthers' technical specifications supported that belief. Yet, in actual combat, American tank destroyers with inferior armor and arguably inferior guns achieved kill ratios that should have been impossible. The reason was not American technical superiority. The reason was doctrine, training, and tactical innovation. American crews understood how to fight with the equipment they had been given. They adapted quickly to battlefield realities. When they discovered that 50 caliber machine guns could destroy Panthers, they exploited that discovery ruthlessly. The Panthers' engine deck vulnerability, that 16 millimeters of armor protecting 700 horsepower gasoline engines and all the fuel lines and electrical systems that kept those engines running, had always existed. Acceptable because they never imagined that enemy forces would systematically attack engine decks with heavy machine gun fire. This failure of imagination, this inability to anticipate how enemies might exploit unexpected vulnerabilities, proved costly. Hundreds of Panthers were destroyed or disabled by weapons their designers had never considered threats. The mocking attitude German tankers initially held toward American tank destroyers, the dismissive assessment that anything with 13 millimeters of armor was not a serious threat, was proven catastrophically wrong. By war's end, German tactical manuals had been updated to warn crews about American tank destroyer tactics, including the use of heavy machine gun fire against engine compartments. But by then it was too late to matter. German armor production had collapsed. Fuel shortages meant tanks could barely move. The eastern and western fronts were both collapsing. The tactical lessons learned from fighting Hellcats came too late to affect the war's outcome. For veterans of M18 crews, the experience left lasting memories. They had fought in vehicles that offered minimal protection, knowing that any hit from an enemy weapon would likely penetrate. The open turret meant they were exposed to weather, artillery fragments, and small arms fire. Winter combat was especially brutal, with crews enduring sub-zero temperatures in unheated vehicles. Yet they also experienced the exhilaration of commanding the fastest tank destroyer ever built. The acceleration, the top speed exceeding 55 miles per hour on roads, the ability to outmaneuver any German vehicle, all these characteristics made the M18 exciting to operate even in combat conditions. Crews developed genuine affection for their vehicles, despite or perhaps because of the constant danger. The mechanical reliability particularly impressed crews. Unlike some American vehicles that required constant maintenance, the M18 could operate for hundreds of miles, with minimal service. The Continental radial engine proved robust. The Torquematic transmission required little maintenance compared to manual transmissions. The torsion bar suspension rarely broke. Crews could focus on fighting rather than maintaining their vehicles. The 76mm gun, while not as powerful as the 90mm gun mounted on the M36 tank destroyer, proved adequate for most engagements. With proper ammunition, particularly the high-velocity armor-piercing rounds introduced later in the war, the gun could penetrate even heavy German armor at favorable angles and ranges. The gun's accuracy allowed skilled crews to achieve first-round hits at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. But the .50 caliber machine gun remained the weapon that defined many veterans' memories. The realization that their machine guns could destroy the Panthers they had been trained to fear, that sustained fire could shred engine decks and ignite fuel systems, transformed how crews thought about their capabilities. They were not just hunting tanks with their main gun, they were hunting tanks with every weapon available. This mentality, that any weapon could be decisive if employed properly, that unconventional tactics could overcome conventional superiority, that speed and positioning mattered more than armor thickness, defined the Hellcat crew's approach to combat. They fought smart rather than fighting tough. They accepted vulnerability and turned it into speed. They found weak points in enemy vehicles that should have been invincible. The German tankers who dismissed the M18 as fragile, who mocked its thin armor and open turret, who assumed that technical superiority guaranteed tactical dominance, learned a harsh lesson. The best tank is not necessarily the heaviest or the most heavily armed. The best tank is the one that accomplishes its mission while surviving to fight again. By that measure, the M18 Hellcat was extraordinarily effective. The image of German Panther tanks, technological marvels representing the peak of wartime German engineering, burning on the fields of France with their engine decks shredded by American machine gun fire, captured the essential truth of the M18's service. Innovation and adaptation could defeat superior technology. Speed could substitute for armor, and sometimes the deadliest weapon was not the one anyone expected. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.